last night, excuse me, last night I was talking about a story that I had come across. Carol Lee at Daily Kos wrote about it, as did Lisa Flam at AOL News, and several other places on the net. Let me preface the story by saying, when my now 32-year-old son, Chris, was 6, I had him in a private school for like 2 years. I was a single parent at the time, and Chris and I were living by ourselves in Midtown Atlanta. And there was a nearby private school, very progressive, very interesting, and not too expensive. I think the tuition was probably about $700 a month. And so I sent Chris there for a couple of years. This is back in the day when I guess I was working for CNN at the time. And the school was fine, but after 2 years in this private school, I decided that the progressive, small p, I'm not talking about political, I'm talking about the style of teaching that they were using, that their system was just not what I felt was giving Chris the kind of basic education that I got, that you probably got. You know, the old reading, writing, and arithmetic thing, right? Rote memory and so much stuff. A lot of people make fun of rote memory in education, but some of it is absolutely necessary to put those multiplication tables into a kid's head so they're there forever. Put lists of adverbs in a kid's head so they're there forever. You know, that sort of thing. So anyway, I decided to switch Chris into a public school. The public school that was in our area was just not one that I wanted to send him to. Their academic record was crappy. There were episodes of, if not violence, too many fights among little kids. The school system at the time, the Atlanta public school system, was in the ditch. It's in the ditch again. But so anyway, I made a decision to send him to a nearby school in whose district we didn't live. And the way I did that, his mother, even though Chris was living with me, I had custody of him, yada, yada, yada. His mother lived in the school district. So we very simply listed his mother's address. Chris didn't live with his mother. Chris lived with me. And it was about a 4-mile trek to get into school every morning. All right. Chris went to, I think he started his 2nd grade at the public school. And when he was in the 3rd grade, after he'd been there for about a year and a half, the principal called me in one day. Real nice woman. And she said, listen, we know what you're doing about sending Chris here. You don't live in the district. And even though Chris's mother lives in the district, we just can't continue like this. If you want to continue to send Chris here, you're going to have to pay tuition. And I said, oh, okay, how much is the tuition? She says, $200 a month. I said, okay, I'll pay the $200 a month. Well, to make a long story short, Chris finished up. That school only went to the 5th grade, and then he went on to middle school in the same district, and so on and so forth. Now, at no time when this was going on did anyone approach me about, you're breaking the law. The principal said to me, you can't continue to send Chris here because you don't live in the district. If you want to send him here, it's going to cost you $200 a month for public school tuition. And a friend of mine said, well, when you got busted, didn't you feel kind of guilty? I said, no. Guilty about what? What are you talking about? I lived right next to the district that that contained the school in which I decided to send him. No, I don't feel, what? I pay my taxes. The taxes go to the county. This is all the same county, yada, yada. Yeah, but you were cheating, Malloy. I said, oh, bite me. So the story ended. And Chris went on, and the story stops there. It's just a brick wall. Until I read the other day this report by Carol Lee at Daily Kos and by a writer at AOL and a couple other places. There's a woman in Ohio, a single mom, living in the projects, who is going to school herself to earn a teaching credential in order to make a better living for herself and her kids, 2 children, 12 and 16. She decided to enroll her children in the district where her father lived. Now, it's a single mom. You know, as soon as anytime I see single parent, it reminds me back in the day when Chris and I were going through the whole single parenthood thing. Now, you know, I'm not to imply that there's anything wrong with his mother. It's just that we decided, his mother and I decided, that Chris would be better served as a little boy being raised with me. He had access to his mom any time, and she spent a lot of time with him. So, you know, there's no big intrigue here. In my case, it was just that's the way we had decided to do it. So this woman that I'm referring to, she decided, well, you know, my dad, the kid's grandfather, lives in the district, so I'll list his address so that I can get my kids in a school that has good test scores. The school district has a terrific rating, and I'm trying to get out of the projects. This woman obviously was saying to herself, I need to get out of the projects. She herself was in school getting a teaching certificate. Well, you know what happened. As reported in the local media in Ohio, Kelly Williams-Bolar, that's her name, is a single mother with 2 girls aged 12 and 16, and is only a few credit hours short of graduating from the University of Akron with a teaching degree. This is in Akron, Ohio. She was working as a teaching assistant with special needs children at Bucktel High School. She was also caring for her ailing father, who has been charged with multiple felonies, her sick father, in this case. Miss Williams-Bolar was convicted of the 2 felony counts last Saturday night after 7 hours of jury deliberations. On Tuesday, the judge sentenced her to 5 years in prison, but suspended all but 10 days in the county jail, saying that to not include time behind bars would, quote, demean the seriousness, end quote, of the offense. She was also given 2 years of probation and 80 hours of community service. What did she do? She did essentially the same thing that I did. She decided that she wanted to get her children into a school district where they could get an education. So she used her father's address. I decided I wanted to get my son into a school district that had a better reputation, so I used his mother's address. Same thing. In addition, this woman, Kelly Williams-Bolar, her father was charged with grand theft for allowing the woman to use his address when the girls didn't live there. Prosecutors in this case claim it cost the school district $30,500 for the girls' education at their school, with no tax base supporting their attendance. Now that leads you to believe, doesn't it, why there was no offsetting charge for what their education would have cost in their home district. If it cost $30,000 to go to the school district right next door, what did it cost in the district where the kids lived? Aha! Either it should have been a wash, or else there is some, shall we say, inequality in the 2 districts. More when we come back. So, in Ohio, single mom, 2 kids, 12 and 16. Her name is Kelly Williams-Bolar. She has now been convicted of 2 felonies for registering her kids in a different district, and her sick father, the girl's grandfather, the children's grandfather, is going to be charged with, has been charged with grand theft. The prosecutor said that sending the children to a different district costs the district to which this woman sent her kids $30,000, which makes you wonder why it wasn't a wash for the county system. If it costs $30,000 to send 2 kids to a school in District A and District B is right next door, what's the difference in the price? Unless, of course, there is some horrific inequity between the 2 districts. Now, at first, the judge was the target of everybody was blaming the judge for what is clearly, as Carol Lee at Daily Kos points out, clearly an outrageous miscarriage of justice. But if you read further, it seems to be the fault of the prosecutor, the investigating officers, and perhaps most especially the superintendent of schools for this Copley-Fairlawn district in Akron, Ohio. According to reports, the judge said the county prosecutor's office refused to consider reducing the charges against the mom to misdemeanors, and that all closed-door talks to resolve the case outside of court met with failure. The mom, 40 years old, was sentenced Tuesday to 10 days in jail after a jury convicted her of 2 felony counts of tampering with records. The judge said numerous pretrial hearings were held since last summer. The judge said, quote, the state would not move, would not budge, and offer Miss Williams-Bolar to plead to a misdemeanor, end quote. Now, it gets creepier when you see how far they went to investigate and prosecute this mom. From the local ABC news station, Newsnet 5 in Akron, this is how they reported it. Prosecutors said Miss Williams-Bolar lived in Akron, but falsified enrollment papers in the Copley-Fairlawn School District so her 2 girls could attend for 2 years. Prosecutors said the lies cost the district about $30,000. Copley-Fairlawn does not have open enrollment, and out-of-district tuition is about $800 a month. The school district spent about $6,000 to bring the case to trial. That includes hiring a private investigator who followed Miss Williams-Bolar and her children around while secretly videotaping their movements. Superintendent Brain Poe said Copley-Fairlawn has lost hundreds of thousands of dollars because of parents illegally enrolling their children into his schools. Now, the article at the television station's website goes on to say that this is the very first time anyone has ever been brought up on felony charges for sending their kids out of district. And as Carol Lee asked, do you think it's coincidence that they brought these charges against a black woman sending her black children to a white, affluent, successful school? Were they afraid these 2 kids would bring down the property values or the test scores or both? Carol Lee writes, this makes me shaky angry. This is what I mentioned last night when I told you a little bit about the story. I get the same feeling, the kind of angry where you want to walk on your front porch and scream. The kind of angry that if you think about this, you can't go to sleep at night. You lay there in bed and you just go, oh my God, what? Every child in this country should have the right to a good education, but they don't. And when a parent takes desperate steps, Carol Lee writes, to ensure that they have a good education while caring for an ailing parent and going to school herself, a jail sentence is not the answer. Ever. Think about this. You shouldn't ever go to jail for sending your kids to school. I don't give a goddamn what school it is. That's all. But as Carol Lee writes, as angry as I am, it doesn't even come near what anger must feel like within the black community about this. And when we come back after this break, I'll share with you what Elon James White, black man, writing for Salon, what he has to say about it. You're following this? I'm sure there are some Ayn Rand people who appreciate the fact that she was a goddamn speed freak junkie and a smoker and died of lung cancer and took Medicare and Social Security while she exhorted all of her brain-dead readers, don't ever do that! I'm sure there are some Ayn Rand followers out there who are sitting on their large, padded, well-padded, probably white asses right now thinking, well, Mike, if you break the law, you know, you got to be a law-abiding citizen like me. Ha, ha, ha. Okay, so a mom with two girls, ages 12 and 16. The mom is Kelly Williams-Bolar in the Akron, Ohio area, sends her children out of school district, so the kids will get a decent education. Mom is in trying to get her teaching certificate from University of Akron. The address she uses to send her kids to a better school district is that of her sick and ailing father. The prosecutors hire people to track this woman and her children with video cameras. They finally bust her. She is sentenced to, 10 years in prison, or 5 years in prison for her crime, all of which is suspended except 10 days in jail and 80 hours of community service. I'm quoting from Carol Lee's diary at Daily Kos, and also from AOL, and now from Elon James White, writing for Salon. And this gives a perspective from the black community. Elon James White says, to judge this simply as a case of fraud regarding the mom is to ignore the surrounding circumstances. Some say that legally speaking, circumstances, quote, quote, don't matter. But if you murder someone, they specifically have to figure out if it was a crime of passion, was it self-defense, was it premeditated? Each crime receives wildly different sentences. The bottom line is that a person is dead, but somehow that's not black and white. They say Miss Williams-Bolar was judged by a jury of her peers. Was she really? Was it a group of poor minorities trying to finally have a chance at the supposed American dream? Were these peers people whose families have tried for generations to rise from the injustice and inequalities that they literally had nothing to do with? Show me these peers. I'm not saying Kelly Williams-Bolar was right. I'm not saying she shouldn't have to pay what she owes to the local government. I'm saying to make an example of a poor mother with a family on her first offense is unconscionable. To think this reasonable is to ignore the reality that we live in and the shades of right and wrong that appear in so many offenses. By the way, America stole a lot of labor from my people, Elon James White writes. Are we going to get any of that owed money anytime soon? No? Didn't think so. And Dr. Boyce Watkins writes, I'm not sure why the court is treating this law-abiding mom like a thug who ran into a building with a shotgun and robbed the district of $30,000. Instead, they could simply subtract the amount it costs for her kids to go to the second school from the amount that would be spent for them to attend the first school. I'm sure the difference would still be substantial, since American educational apartheid dictates that schools in poor neighborhoods are blatantly, significantly less quality than other schools. The racial division within American schools are nothing less than a blatant and consistent human rights violation and should certainly be treated as such. Dr. Watkins goes on, this case is a textbook example of everything that remains racially wrong with America's educated, economic, and criminal justice systems. Let's start from the top. Had Mrs. Williams-Bolar been white, she likely would never have been prosecuted for this crime in the first place. In fact, Dr. Watkins writes, parenthetically, I'd love for them to show me a white woman in that area who's gone to jail for the same crime. She also is statistically not as likely to be living in a housing project with the white woman, with the need to break an unjust law in order to create a better life for her daughters. Being black is also correlated with the fact that Miss Williams-Bolar likely didn't have the resources to hire the kinds of attorneys who could get her out of this mess, since the average black family's wealth is roughly 1/10 that of white families. And finally, economic inequality is impactful here, in this case, because that's the reason that Miss Williams-Bolar's school district likely has fewer resources than the schools she chose for her kids. In other words, black people have been historically robbed of our economic opportunities, leading to a two-tiered reality that we are then imprisoned for attempting to alleviate. That, my friends, is American Racism 101, end quote. And Carol Lee adds, you bet it is. If ever there were a case where a presidential pardon would be in order, this is one. I'm still creeped out about this school district hiring private detectives and videotaping the movements of two girls and their mother. It takes a sick kind of racist jerk to authorize that for school attendance. But you see, it was a black mom. And just to add insult to injury, prosecutors had the option of retrying this woman's father and the mom for the grand theft charges. What a great way to hold an anvil over their heads. Carol Lee writes, I keep trying to reach for the right set of words to express just how ugly this situation is, but they're not there. It's a situation that exceeds my vocabulary. It's despicable. The school attendance police, the 21st century equivalent of the KKK. So, Mom told ABC News, according to AOL, quote, it's overwhelming. I'm exhausted. I did this for my daughters, so there it is. I did this for them, end quote. She said her father lives in the Copley-Fairlawn district, the one in which the mom sent her kids to go to school and for which she has now been busted in charge of felonies. Her father lives there, and the mother said she lived with him part-time after her home was burglarized, and she wanted her children to be safe. She told ABC News, quote, when my home got broken into, I felt it was my duty to do something else. Jury convicted her last week of two counts of tampering with records. Remember now, she still has other charges hanging over her and her sick father. Right? Grand theft charges. What was the grand theft? Stealing the services of the school district. Anyway, a jury convicted her of 2 counts of tampering with records. She was sentenced 3 days later. That's according to the Akron Beacon Journal newspaper. She had to begin the sentence immediately, and she was taken from the courtroom sobbing. Before she was sentenced, she told the judge, quote, there was no intention at all, end quote, to deceive the school. She begged to be spared jail time. Her father, who's 64, went on trial with his daughter, but the jury deadlocked on the charge of grand theft. And in a jailhouse interview with the Akron newspaper, Mom said she'd do it again if she had to. She said, quote, if I had the opportunity, if I had to do it all over again, would I have done it? After pausing, she answered, I would have done it again. But I would have been more detailed. I think they wanted to make an example of me. End quote. And the judge, remember the judge, Patricia Cosgrove, who was shocked that the prosecutors would not reduce it to misdemeanor and just get rid of the case. The judge said, quote, I felt that some punishment or deterrent was needed for other individuals who might think to defraud the various school districts. Some punishment or deterrent. Now remember what the News Channel 5, the ABC affiliate there, reported, that the school district spent $6,000 to bring her to trial. They hired a private investigator to follow her and videotape her. And this mom's case is the first residency challenge to reach a criminal courtroom, at least in this particular state and school district. And remember, this is Ohio. Ohio has become a nest of fascism. The governor there, the new governor, John Kasich, who's as qualified to be governor of Ohio as he is qualified to be, I don't know, an astronaut. John Kasich is a fraud, a phony. I know him. But in Ohio now, the example has been set. You do something like this, you're going to be sentenced to 5 years in jail. And if you have a compassionate judge like Judge Cosgrove here, she'll reduce the sentence to 10 days to serve. But your family will be destroyed. There'll be the chance that your sick father is going to be brought up on charges again. And the 12-year-old and the 6-year-old, they no longer are able to go to the two schools. They've been tossed out and have been staying with their grandfather. And Mom, she said, I'm upset because I've never been away from my family. I really, when I see a story like that about Kelly Williams-Bolar and her 2 children, and what her motivation was to send her kids to a school district that she should not have sent her kids. And I think what motivated this crime, and then the conditions under which this woman, she has to live. There is a kicker to the story. The sentence puts this mother's teaching career at risk. She's close to graduating with an education degree from the University of Akron. And right now she's in jail right now, but she works as a special needs teaching assistant at a high school. And from the jail that she's been put in, she said, quote, I'm not going to give up on my education, end quote. But the judge in this case said, as of now, she can't become a teacher. The judge said, quote, because of the felony conviction, you will not be allowed to get your teaching degree under Ohio law as it stands today. The court's taking into consideration that is also a punishment that you will have to serve. End quote. I agree with the question. Where do we live? What in the hell is this story about? Is it just plain old-fashioned racism dressed up with a painted face of the year 2011? Is that all it is? Just your standard garbage racism? Or is there more here to the story? Is there more than anyone wants to admit? Single mom, 2 kids, sends her children to a different school district. An illegal act. A crime. As you brain-addled, drug-saturated, freaked-out, libertarian, right-wing ghouls would be quick to point out to me. Well, she broke the law, Mike. And again, it recalls for me what Mario Savio said. This keeps coming. This is just haunting the hell out of me. And 1964, for God's sake. 1964, on the steps of Spruill Hall, University of California, Berkeley. When Savio said, there's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart, that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it to the people who own it. That unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all. End quote, Mario Savio, December 2nd, 1964. 1964. Was that almost half a century ago? So again, you know, I started the story of this woman by saying that I did exactly the same thing. Exactly. 25 years ago. Exactly the same thing. Here, well, actually, it was in Atlanta. And nobody sent the videotape police after me or my son Chris. Nobody said anything when I got busted. When the principal, a youngish woman, called me into her office and said, Mike, we know that you're using Chris's mother's address to send Chris to the school, and that's violating the law. So tell you what, Chris can continue to come here, but you're going to have to pay what we consider to be a tuition since you live out of district. Oh, how much is that? $200 a month. Oh, okay. Now, Chris had been at the school for a year. Did I have to go back and pay the previous 9 months? Of course not. Never came up. So for the next roughly year and a half, 2 years, maybe max, until Chris moved on to middle school, I paid the $200 a month tuition. That was the end of it. I mean, that was the whole story. But I live in the racist South. This woman lives in the liberal state of Ohio. I'm joking, of course. So her teaching career, probably not going to happen. All right, President Obama, step up to the plate just once. Just once. Step up to the plate for this woman in Akron, Ohio. Come on, Mr. President. You can do it. Come on. Just do it. Give her a pardon. Now. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Keep it lit. I'm Mike Malloy.